Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 12th episode of the Don't Sink podcast. Today I have Jeffrey Charles Hardy. He is the founder of Care for Peace. He is also a healthcare futurist and a facility planner and an author. He's been around the world many times and done many amazing things for the healthcare industry. I'm going to give him a chance to explain how he got into this and a little about where he's from.
Thank you, Noah. I just guess I need to start with a experience I had when I was only 10 years old, and it was a big shock. I mean, here's this 10-year-old kid coming from Northern California.
Right.
My parents drove me to Mexico. We went to Tijuana.
Wow.
My father had heard about Mexican food and thought he would take my 12-year-old sister and me over the border to taste the food and to see what's happening. Well, guess what?
Nice.
We got on the other side of the border, and all of a sudden we saw abject poverty. We saw some children just running around with bare feet, kicking a ball, or at one point I looked over in an alleyway and there was a little girl about the same age as my sister taking care of babies that were in boxes. So it was like, I'm talking about cardboard boxes and babies in it. And then no sooner had we started walking, but there was an old lady, probably the age of my mother, although she looked twice as old as my mother, with her hand out, looking at me and my sister and my mother and father. I didn't know what she was putting her hand out for. I think that, now I look back and of course she was looking for money, but it was such a big shock that it set my life in motion. Going back to school and sitting in chairs in a little warm classroom, it just completely upset me. So that's when it all began.
Yeah, learning how the rest of the world, just the contrast of those two worlds can be stark. And I think a lot of our nation needs to open their eyes to see just how vast and how contrasting different parts of the world are. A lot of it's hidden through media. There's a lot of narratives about other places around the world, and there's also a lot of beautiful places around the world that are viewed as third world or stricken with governments that are oppressing. But I think just having that wealth and breadth of knowledge of different places can give people a better look at themselves and where they live and lead them in the right direction of how they can make their nation a better place. So you had this experience as a child, and then what was your first inkling of motivation or inspiration to pursue the healthcare field?
Well, once that happened in my childhood, I was unsettled until I was in United States Coast Guard as a hospital corpsman trainee in the reserves, and I was taking care of the men who were coming back from Vietnam War and the Mekong Delta, and I had an incredible feeling that occurred while I was taking care of them. And I said to myself, what is this? It's not happiness. What is this feeling? And the feeling was peace. It was peace. And I suddenly started, I shouldn't say suddenly it felt good, okay? And it was wonderful to take care and have these guys looking at me and not being mean and saying, hey man, throw a ball or whatever, guys do. These guys were just lying there and happy that I was taking care of them. And that's when I put two and two together, and the two was care and the other one was peace. Not happiness. It's happiness is the material stuff, but this is the peace. And it wasn't until I had worked in the healthcare field for maybe 2 or 3 years in the United States when I realized that, wait a minute, nurses they understand what care for peace is all about. That it's part of their
Yeah.
nature. And I suddenly realized that, wait a minute, it's part of my nature too. And I kept
Right.
meeting teachers and other caregivers. It's all part of nature. It's their nature to care for peace. And that's when I started thinking about what it would mean if we took that concept a little further, if we use that as our template, if we
Yes.
could use that as our new language to communicate instead of killing for peace. Let's use the tools that we already have in our spirit to to generate the discussion to get us into the second human evolution. Now you're going to say,
Yes.
what? you know,
Yes.
because the first human evolution is what I'm calling the time period from 2.5 million years ago to about the mid 60s, when mutually assured destruction pretty much put our fingers on the fact that humanity had already conquered nature, and
Right.
we knew where everything was in the world. We could now blow it up. So
Yeah.
I end the first human evolution on what that period of time was, mid 50s to mid 60s. Truman was the president when the approval for the Hiroshima bomb, and but the mutually assured destruction is really when the big countries were able to blow us all up at
Yeah.
once. So, what are we doing now? Well, we're flopping around. We're flailing around. We're just like fish
Yeah.
on the dock, or whatever the expression is, during what I call the suspended human evolution, because this is the period of time after the first human evolution when we're saying, what the heck is going on? What are these wars doing? What are all these migrants who are uh, getting on boats and going from northern Africa as far as north, and they're drowning, some of them, just trying to get away from the overpopulated and the wars that are happening in Mexico, in Africa. So we're in this period of time now during the suspended human evolution. And remember, that's another word that words that we have to start using as part of this new language, so that we can talk with people and
Yeah.
start discussing where we are now, because second human evolution has not begun yet.
Right. Indeed. So in this suspended state that we're in, why do you think we're here right now? Do you think it's because I believe that most people on Earth would uh nod their head if you asked them, "Would you like world peace?" Um. So why do you think, as a race, as a species, we're stuck in this suspended state of limbo, and we haven't really started going into that second human evolution that you speak of?
I like the question because it inspires me to answer it in a global way. I think we first, in order to be able to answer that question, we all have to ask that question together.
Yeah.
And that means we have to use the right words, the right language. Okay. So, what is peace? Is peace the space between wars? Is peace what is the time after a war is over? Is peace sitting up on top of a mountain with your legs crossed and your arms crossed and your eyes closed and singing Hare Krishna or whatever song you want, while the people down in the valley below your mountain are suffering? I think
Mm,
that we've got to redefine peace as a feeling. It is a feeling that we can have when we are caring. So you have active caring for dynamic peace. And that's something that we have to get a grasp of individually, so that when we're talking about it with other people, they can say, oh, okay, I'll use peace that way. Because you can't use peace the way it used to be defined, because after the Civil War, Reconstruction in no way was peace.
Yeah.
The reign of terror that occurred in France after the revolution, that was not peace. I mean, the bottom line is, after World War One, Germany fomented its pain until it became something so bad that it became World War II. I mean, the bottom line is we've got to start using the right language. So that's my answer to you. It's, yeah, here we are now. What are we going to do? And I say, wait a
Mhm.
minute, you got to back up. This is not a do. This is what are we going to talk about? What are we
Yeah.
going to discuss? And that's the reason why I look to you, because you're the guy who is holding the key. This whole podcast thing is it's ubiquitous. It gives people an opportunity to tap into you and to tap into other people and what they're interested in, because you're starting something. And I do mean starting. I don't think that even though there's something like 2.5 million podcasters, no, I mean if you look at all the podcasts out there, they're helping you with real estate and
Yeah.
helping you find the best restaurant. I mean, there's all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff. I think what you're doing, which is dealing with the future of the planet. Oh my God, the future of humanity. That's the biggest thing that is happening right now, that I am honored to talk with you, because you have the ball, not me. I'm just writing books and I'm talking to people and I'm having a good time. So, but you're the guy with the ball.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate the kind words. Um, I like the term that you used, dynamic peace. I think that's a very important concept because a lot of the way we thought about peace before was very static and still, and it's a time where there's not conflict. It's kind of peace is kind of looked at in a contrast to violence or war or times of like not having. And I think dynamic peace, the way I visualize it, is more of an active concept. It's an act of caring. It's an act of kindness. It's an act of
Mm,
waking up with the intention of change and the intention of, informing each other about informing other human beings about not only your likes, your beliefs, but also being patient and accepting of other people and their beliefs and having that discourse, which is why I think podcasting is such a great medium for that.
yeah.
Um, and just the thought of a world where we can all wake up with that intention, I think would be one of the first steps in getting towards that second human evolution because a lot of us are in the West specifically so singular minded or we're focused on ourselves. How can we better our own situation? How can we better our bottom line? How can we better our house? How can we get a nicer car?
Right.
And these are all external things that are fleeting and they're things that don't necessarily make the world a better place, even though you might have done well for yourself and you have the nice things in life that doesn't necessarily fix anything for anybody else. Like you said, there might be a guy on top of a mountain that feels he's at peace and he has gotten rid of all the turmoil in his life while people below him are still suffering.
Good differentiation, because the difference between peace and happiness have to be established.
Yeah.
Happiness is what you're talking about, that I got all the stuff I need, and I've got my house and I've got my car and all that's where happiness comes in. And I think we all need to be happy. We all need to find happiness. The
Yeah.
United States Constitution and the pursuit of happiness, yes, very important. But is peace something that we can pursue? Ah, peace is something that we can attain through care. Through
Yeah.
care, we can attain peace. And by differentiating between the two, gives us an opportunity to have that wonderful feeling that we can put our finger on it. I, I believe that if you can't put your finger on it, it's not worth
Yeah.
because especially since we've got to share this with everybody. And I mean, I've been all over the world. Yes, I've worked in Nigeria and Vietnam, and especially the most recent experience in Myanmar, and talking with people and having conversations with groups of people, they get it. This
Yeah.
is not rocket science. It's like the nurses when I realized that they understand what it means to care for peace because it's part of their nature. They aren't saying, well, you're not telling me anything new. Actually, they don't ever say that. They say, oh, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Don't you like that? In other words, the words, oh, you're not telling me anything new, is another method of discussion. But wow, that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
That's the discussion and the concepts and the feelings that we have to have while we're having these discussions. It's a wonderful place to be. I just tickles me every time I have these conversations with people.
Yeah. It's wonderful that we have the opportunity to have this discourse and this dialogue because one thing I think about a lot is human capability. And like you mentioned earlier, we have the capability of mutually assured destruction. We have the ability to upend all civilization at the press of a button. We also have the ability to create giant metal tubes that fly in the sky. We have the capability of
Yeah,
communicating with each other on screens across the globe. And I think we're so capable as a race. We just have to shift focus and shift intention towards the dynamic peace aspect of it. And I think if we can make a bomb that destroys the entire human population, in the contrast, why wouldn't we have the ability to create world peace? I think world peace is something that a lot of people see as kind of abstract. And the more we get into this human journey, we kind of keep pushing it back. Kind of like we're like, oh, well,
mm,
maybe in my
interesting.
kid's lifetime, or maybe in my kid's
Yeah,
lifetime, we'll achieve peace. But then
right,
every generation after that will say the same thing. Like we'll keep pushing the clock back, and we're such a capable species. I think we have to give ourselves more credit for what we can achieve. And world peace is something that, although may be complex, I don't think it's very complicated. I don't. It
right,
involves a lot of things and a lot of factors, but it doesn't involve a lot of ingenuity or it doesn't require any
right,
genius. We all want it. We all, no matter what race, creed, religion you want to live a life that is meaningful, and you probably want to create a world that's meaningful for your offspring because that's just how we're genetically made. We want to create a good life for ourselves, and we want to create a good life for our offspring, no matter who you are.
yeah,
So knowing that, I think on an individual level, we need to take more responsibility for what we leave behind, the type of world we want to leave behind, the type of mentality that we want to project onto the next generation. Because a lot of the work we've done in the last, I'd say, 2,000 years have been cleaning up the mess of the generations before us. And if we're constantly doing that, um, you're just working in a circle. It's very cyclical. It doesn't breed much progress. If we're trying to also create a world we want to live in while also trying to clean up the mistakes that our ancestors have made. But I think that intention should be, I think every human being is a designer. I think every human being, no matter how talented you think you are or what your gifts are, I think we're all designers in some way,
I
shape, or
like that.
form. I think if we all view ourselves as that and give ourselves that credit of, I can make something that's going to leave a lasting impact on the earth, no matter if it's physical or an ideology. I can leave something that another man can and pick up where I left off and keep building upon it till we get to a point of, okay, we know that the generations before us have left us these pieces. What part of the puzzle do I add? And then at the climax of it, we have this world where we all 8 billion, or all however the world population is, we've all contributed to this larger puzzle of peace. And that's, to me, what dynamic peace would look like. Do you believe that I mean, we've been on all 7 continents of this earth. We we've literally built canals, we've built dams, we have almost complete control of our environment. What are some things that you think can be implemented, whether it's through legislation or through infrastructure, that will give people more a perspective on how much we can contribute to world peace and changing the world for the better?
A loaded question.
Yeah,
I think the first thing that we have to recognize is that peace is not a place,
yeah,
and it isn't even a place in time. That
hmm
if we pull peace back to the reality of the moment, it's right now, it's what's in our hearts. Okay, listening to you talking about, your offspring and making sure that you leave the world a better place for the next, it's very important to have those visual ideas, because those are the things that give us hope.
yeah,
And hope is probably the most important thing that we have to bring to the table, because if you don't have hope, then you're not going to have anything else. And so
yeah,
hope is really part of the application of your peace that you have. So my answer is not that it's something that we need to do. I think right now we've got to back up,
hmm
because we've got to back up so that we can talk with other people about general and global issues. We can't be
yeah,
constantly saying, I have an opinion that this is right and that is wrong, because that doesn't put the issue in the center for us to discuss. So
yeah,
when you're talking about the global problem, I hear many times, well, do you believe that there's a global problem of the weather? And then,
yeah,
there's some people who still say, oh, no, that's just a bunch of Democratic stuff, or, the left says that. The minute you start bringing opinion into the discussion, you can't really talk about what needs to be talked about, which is global issues. Uh, There's a lot of international work that is being done right now by United Nations, by the World Health Organization, and by an infinite number of non-government organizations, including my nonprofit organization, which was Care for Peace. And it's a international nonprofit organization that went over to Myanmar and built a community development and health center in one of the most rural places in the world. Most people
mm,
don't even know where Myanmar is, or Burma, because it's not in Africa, it's in
yeah,
Asia. So
yeah,
when we talk to people about what we did, they don't even know where we're talking about. So, well, it used to be
yeah,
called Burma. And they say, oh, yeah, I thought that was, that's in stories, by Rudyard Kipling and things like that. But what we did was we went over there and did something that needs to be done all over the world. So my answer to your question is something that I have already done with my Care for Peace board, with our partners in Myanmar, and the Myanmar government when it was Aung San Suu Kyi's government, and that was we were there during a very wonderful period of time when democracy was taking a foothold, but the military coup just wiped everything out, including our vision, which was take our very successful community development and health center and replicate it all over rural Myanmar, because Myanmar hardly has any real roads anywhere. You're lucky if it's dirt that you can drive down. It's just,
Yeah.
this is a very, very difficult country to have anything modern. So when we went there, we had to fly into the the Yangon, or used to be called Rangoon, and then we had to take another flight the next day to a small little airport where we had to get off the airplane and spend another night in the hotel, and then the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning get in a boat and putter 3.5 hours to a place where we would have to get out and hike to the village where we built this
Wow.
center. Okay, so our idea was very simple, and that is that if you provide for a village that gives them health care, business development, community development, utilities, then both the government and the people will have the peace. Care, peace.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is the answer to your question is not a big answer. It's a
Yeah.
very small answer, and that is, where are you going to give care for peace? And you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher. That does it. you know, you can you're probably already doing it. So that's what we need to do on a global scale. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about the big stuff, like putting barriers up on the seawall so that we can deal with the rising seas, I can't have conversations like that. I have nothing. That's stuff for the news people and for me to say, okay, well, that's
Yeah.
cool. What's for dinner? It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not in my realm. People have to do things that are in their ability, in their realm of being able to uh, uh, provide for caring and provide for their own peace. And hopefully it will give care and peace to other people.
Yeah. That's a very fascinating point about starting from just what you're capable of and just what you can do in your part, starting small. I think when we think about these larger abstract concepts like, government or world peace or infrastructure and all these large, grandiose ideas, we can get a little overwhelmed in thinking, well, what could I do? I'm just one person. How could I change the world? And I think what you just said is a great example of how people can take action and how one person can put their footprint on um, or take the next step towards that world peace and that dynamic peace that you spoke of. And I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what you did in Myanmar in terms of the healthcare system and like um, what are some insights you gained when you were there?
I love answering that question because I get to repeat some history that is just wonderful. The first thing is I was invited by the government to come on over and help them build a hospital. So design and plan a hospital. I am not a builder. I'm not an architect. I'm not, I don't know how to put a brick on top of another brick without the one on top falling off. So it's my job as a facilitator and as a planner to put all the pieces and get all the people together and have commonality and then understandings, you name it. So I went on over, had a wonderful time at the government level with Aung San Suu Kyi's Minister of Health. We had some other ministers there, education, finance. But the bottom line is, when I went and looked at their existing hospital, I didn't think they needed any new hospitals. I think that they had some very nice hospitals already. They weren't being utilized as we would assume that they would be utilized in the West. But that didn't matter. I just went out to the rural areas and realized they didn't have any health care at all. So I said,
Yeah.
let's forget the hospital. Let's look at a rural community. Pick a rural community, and we ended up picking a rural community that had been the birthplace of one of our early board members who we met in San Francisco. And so he said, "Well, this is my town. Why don't we go to my town?" And I don't even think he'd been back to his town because we ended up paying for, both him and me to fly back to Myanmar and to take those 2 airplane trips and the hotels in between and the boat ride and the hike to
Yeah.
his town. And uh, that's really how this whole process began. So I just said, break it down, break it down. We don't need a hospital. We need a community center, and
Yeah.
it needs to be a health center, and it needs to help the community to be developed. And that's it. I mean, that's how we got started. And
That's
I mean,
nice.
when you think about a health center, we're talking about just basic immunizations,
Yeah.
health checkups, someone coming in and saying, I've got dysentery. And so you give them a few pills. I mean, this is really basic stuff. We ended up putting a birthing unit inside of this clinic we built. Now, the clinic is a brick, cement, and steel structure. Uh, it'll withstand cyclones and just regular weather. So that was one of the things that we insisted on, and that is that it's not going to be built out of the wood that they can get because their houses keep getting wiped out anyway.
Yeah.
And so we wanted something that was going to stand the forces of nature. So we got to do that. Just lovely. And I feel bad that we weren't able to continue building 250 of these at least throughout the country, because that would have really given the government an opportunity to say, hey, we do care for your peace
Yeah.
and we want to stay. But the military owns the country once again.
Yeah. I think being as well versed at in just global healthcare, and you're just the wealth of knowledge you've gained from your travels, um, what would you say, just to educate the listeners, are some of the places on earth that need that just basic help, like the places that are very either rural or just a little behind when it comes to modern healthcare?
Ooh, I'd say United States.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work in rural America. Uh, that's where I cut my teeth. Uh, and I've been to some places in America, in the deep south, middle of the country, even in places in California, where I think they could desperately need rural health. And by the way, rural health is very difficult to serve because it's pretty much corporate America. And so, what corporation wants to own a clinic or a hospital that is in a tiny little town where uh, they don't have enough money to be able to pay? Um, and we don't have the attitude in America that healthcare should be like a fire department. We need to look at healthcare like a fire department, that you need
Yeah.
to be ready. And we've got fire
Yeah.
departments in California that aren't ready. I mean, when you look at,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's not the fire department's fault. It's our fault. We should have halfway decent preventive systems. And so we don't have preventive health care in America as much as we have curative, and that's another whole discussion. But I look
Yeah.
at America as the first place that I would do it if I had a chance. But then, of course, every other country, we did look at potentially going to Nicaragua and uh, Costa Rica, a bunch of other wonderful Central American areas to go next, just because I have to tell you, I was kind of tired getting in an airplane and having to fly
Yeah.
and and wait 3 days to be able to get to the place
Yeah.
in Myanmar. I mean, you could go to Myanmar any way around the world and it would take you just as long to get there. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and South America, all over South America, I would definitely, because you're really helping the villagers and you're not bringing Western uh, medicine to the villagers. You're bringing them the opportunity to serve in the way that they're used to serving and to care the way they used to care for peace. We didn't bring anything fancy. We didn't bring CAT scans to our
Right.
village in Myanmar. We didn't even bring X-ray equipment. You
Mhm.
know, you gotta you gotta help people by asking, how can I help and how high? Now, I'll give you an example of that in Myanmar. When I went there and asked the village people, how can I help and how high? They they said, well, it'd be really great if we had a computer like what you've got right there.
Yeah.
and we'd like to have a camera like what you got right there. And then,
Right.
maybe we could have a projector like the one that you were just using to plug into the generator so that you could show your show. And then, oh, by the way, after you've done that, we'd sure like to have a mobile health van. Here I am in this village the first time. They don't say anything even about a clinic.
Yeah.
They're saying, we need a health can. I said, well, what do you need? What do you mean a health van? So guess what? We bought him a health can van. And then the next time we went to Myanmar, we got in our health van and drove with the doctor and the two nurses and the driver to villages, and they put up their little card table, and then they put a whole bunch of medicines all over the card table, and the nurse with her white outfit and her white hat and her saffron gown, her
Yeah.
skirt, and just to watch this wonderful process. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the next step for these villagers. It's nothing big. It's nothing fancy. Now I will say one of the things that we did that I am very proud of, they started using medical records. They found some
Nice.
paper and they put little
Yeah.
booklets together. And so a patient would get his medical record. And so the doctor would be able to write, this is what I gave the patient. So what are we doing? We're basically treating the patient in their lifetime rather than just treating them for, oh, here's somebody who came in the door. He's got a problem. I'll give him the medicine. He'll go away. The same patient
Right.
comes the next time. You don't know that patient from Adam. And
Right.
so I am very proud of that because we gave them a tool to look at the patient from a continuity of care standpoint. Did I teach them continuity of care? No. They'll,
Right.
I mean, they'll learn that. They'll get that. So probably the biggest thing I learned in this process is the more I learn, the more they learn.
Yes.
Big secret.
Yes. That's very important. That's very important. Just not creating just a complete overhaul, but just, getting those first couple building blocks down is oftentimes it creates way more impact than just trying to go in there and implement the systems we already have here in America, like just trying to
Yeah.
do a complete overhaul of their whole system. I mean, those basic things like, immunization, penicillin, just basic things like that could help a community that just, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people
Uh,
place blame on people
yes.
for not having the education of like where they may live. But I mean, if you don't know that these things exist, if you don't know what a medical record is, I mean, you think very in the moment when it comes to your health. You would not think of your health as an overarching process. You would think of it as more like a,
Uh,
case by case thing where, oh, I'm just sick. I don't know why or I don't know how it got to this point, but all of a sudden I just became ill. And giving them that context and that background is huge. I mean, that could
uh,
that just starts the process of people better understanding their health.
Yeah.
It gives them that initial just okay, and then people we're humans, we're naturally curious, so you give them that first tool,
This,
that you give someone that tool, they'll figure it out, and then they'll want to understand it on a broader perspective because they have that first, they have that first tool. So now they're like, okay, I know what my medical records are now. Maybe I should pay more attention to what I eat because in the last 4 times I went, I had maybe some gastrointestinal problems. So now that I have a computer, I can research these things. I can educate myself. I can learn more. And I think the implementation of the new technologies we've come up with in the last 50 years are going to be crucial to world education and to world healthcare because we use these tools every single day in the West, and we, for the most part, take them for granted. We spend most of our time on our phone, on social media, or we're playing a game. We don't really use it as the tool that it is, which is really a global brain. It's
mm,
a it's an archive of every human discovery ever made. And if you told somebody 500 years ago that that would exist, they would think it's nothing different than magic. A huge archive of all human findings, all human intelligence, and even human opinions, just all amalgamated into this one brain that we all can have access to. So I think that's huge, giving them just those
nice.
basic building blocks. So in terms of the next step, the next thing, the second human evolution, what are some like visions or like visualizations you may have had of what that may look like?
I, I think I'm gonna have to go back to the language.
Hmm.
Once we start using the correct terminology, then we're going to be very careful about using international or
Yeah.
multinational. We've got to be looking at global. And I know
Yes.
that globalization, I don't know, somehow it's gotten a bad vibe to it. There's a lot, we keep coming up with these great words and then they get misused.
Yeah.
I think globalization is the best thing that could ever happen, and we've got to inspire it. I'm a globalist. Oh no, are you
Yeah.
really? That means that you're a communist and a socialist, and
Yeah.
you probably read all the Marx books and things like that. So
Yeah.
no, globalization is where we've got to go, and our conversation has to be global conversation. So we have to think global and we have to act global. And the way we act global is not on the global scale right away. It's on a local scale right away.
Yeah.
So that where well, you're quibbling, Jeff. Isn't that the same as think global and act local? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Let's start doing it. Let's start
Yeah.
doing it. So yeah, that that's really the first thing that we have to do. The next step is what you're doing, and I
Yeah.
hereby challenge you to put this whole thing into your words, um, so that when you're talking with other people in your podcast, other guests, see what they have to say about the first human evolution. You define it as you want to. You define this suspended human evolution right now. You ask them. You ask them the questions that you're asking me, and
Yeah.
let's get this ball rolling.
Yes.
Nobody better than you to be able to start this ball. This is like a girlfriend I had whose father, when I first met him, he was talking in a southern accent. He'd been in Memphis, and he was proud of the fact that he discovered Elvis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found, well, because he was a radio disc jockey. That's what my girlfriend's father was. He was a radio
Mhm.
disc jockey. I found out later that Colonel, I don't know, Colonel Parker or Sanders, I don't know who it was in charge of Elvis, said that to every radio disc jockey in the world. Well, you're the one who's going to discover Elvis. But I'm
Yeah.
telling you, Noah, you are the one who is going to help start this ball rolling. It's just it's got to go. We've got to roll it. We got to use the right words. We've got to use the right words together. We got to use the words like ah. My favorite expression is right on the front cover of my book. Okay,
Yeah.
this is the care for peace, to care for peace, a global mandate to secure the second human evolution and perpetuity. And then right underneath, it's got my favorite quote of all: the process is the solution. The process
Yeah.
is the solution. I think that I know AT&T came out with the system is the solution, but no, 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 no. Systems have to be designed. They have to plan, and it better be a good plan, or you're not going to have a good system.
Yeah.
So it's the process is the solution, because that means that what we're doing right now is part of the process. And I call this process the pre-planning process. Okay, those are some more terms for you, Noah. Okay,
Yeah.
these are more terms for you to be using. So you could say, look, we're just in the pre-planning stage. No, no, I'm not bringing my opinions. I'm saying that this is something that we're going to have to do. What do we do about the population problem in the world? Oh, well, we don't have a population in the problem. So, you're going to
Yeah.
have to take these opinions and throw them away, break them out, get rid of them. Because I'll have people who are talking about the abortion issue, and I say, okay, well, let's back way back and let's just look at the population situation in the world, not
Yeah.
just here. Oh, we don't have a population problem, And so we've got to back up far enough that we have a commonality of discussion. Then we can say, yeah, well, okay, we've got to, yeah, there are too many people in the world. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I heard about this birth spacing thing that they're doing in Africa. Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So just, you have to move in to the issues that we have something that we can touch, that we can do something about from the far back. We're back here.
Yeah.
We've broken it down. And now we can start talking about population control and what that means. But wait a minute. Are we going to talk about population control? No, because nobody wants to be controlled by anything. So guess what? I've changed
Right.
that word too. It's population continuity. Huh?
Nice.
Continuity. Because you and I can start population continuity right now. So what
Yeah.
I did was I figured that if each individual can replicate themselves, man, there's a part of immortality that we have a handle on.
Yeah.
So my wife and I each together had two boys. And then I got fixed because we replicated ourselves.
Yeah.
So, it's not population control, it's population continuity. Now let's look at that from a local area. Let's look at that from a regional area. And then you're going to get problems that I've heard about. We have to have a growth economy or we're not going to be able to grow, and stocks aren't going to get better and better, and people aren't going to
Yeah.
get the dividends they need. Oh no, what are we going to do? Yeah, we've got to design a maintenance economy for the world, not
Yeah.
for one nation, not for two nations or three nations. No, no, no. This is, or not for Africa. We've got to figure out what we can do so that we can stabilize our population and stabilize our use of natural and replenishable resources.
Yes.
So all these new words, man, all these new
Yeah.
words, you gotta put them all together and share them and start challenging people to use those words and enjoy the process, because we are really in a wonderful process that is the solution.
Yes. Indeed, I believe so as well. And the terminology is super important because a lot of people, when they hear these terms, are kind of like trigger words for them that shut their ears off.
Mm,
And I think unifying the terminology and coming up with words and phrases that don't necessarily invoke conflict is super important because we're all so attached to
Yeah.
these ideas, we're attached to our ideologies, we're attached to our opinions. And if we hear a word that may be contrary to that, we're not willing to listen anymore. And that defeats the whole mission because we're supposed to be like two people that disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inherently wrong with two people that have two different ideas. The problem is when you view that person's idea as taking away from your idea, or that person's opinion
Mm.
taking away from your opinion, which is a scarce mindset. It's a scarcity mindset. And like we talked about before with hope, I think having a abundant mindset of hope is not only important, it's compounding. It builds upon itself over time. For example, like if someone has only seen poverty their whole life and they view money on a way larger scale than somebody who's been affluent their whole life
Mm.
because they just have had that scarcity. So when they get money, they hold on to it a little more. They keep it closer. It's because they're scared of losing it. Where there's other people that spend thousands of dollars on shoes. And I think if we all just take a step back and dissolve our opinions and our ideologies and then look down at the earth from more of a bird's eye view,
Mm.
that would be the correct way to look at it because we,
Yeah.
like you said, we are a global race. We are a global people. We're not divided by nations. We're not
Right.
divided by borders or anything like that. We're all one human species, but you know, I like what you said about that first human evolution, how we were doing a certain thing a certain way for a very long time. And I think this limbo period is necessary. I think it's necessary to take a break and assess and look back and analyze, okay, maybe there's some things we need to let go of. Maybe there's some traditions that we need to
Mm.
reanalyze and say, okay, we don't, this isn't 10,000 BC anymore. We don't have to think in this tribalist mind state where it's me
Wow.
versus her, it's me versus the other guy across the river. Because we've come to a better realization than that. We've come to an understanding that we're all one race of people and we all want peace. So let's look at us more. And it's funny because I always think of the concept of aliens. Like whether you believe in them or not, we know if aliens were to come to this planet at any given time, it would almost be like an immediate snap of the finger of we would all forget about all our problems, all our differences, everything that separates us. We would
Mm.
instantly forget about it because we would be faced with something outside of our understanding and outside of our
Wow.
planet. And then we would unify as a planet because now we understand we're not alone. And I think that feeling of we're alone, we're isolated, it's just us is why we have these divisions because we only view the world as just humans. We just think we're the most intelligent race in the entire universe and we're alone. And so I
Right.
think division is natural in that aspect, but I don't think aliens have to land for us to get to the point where we can all view ourselves as one unit, one global race. And I think the terminology again is super important because like you said, when people hear the word globalism or globalist as this negative connotation added to it, where people again go back to that scarcity mindset of, oh, if we're all in one world, if it's a one world government, then I don't have any control. Or if
Right.
who would hold all that power in a world where we're all together? But those are all fear based thoughts. I think if we thought with
Hmm.
more hope and abundance, we we wouldn't look at it like that. We would understand, okay, realistically, if we all were one world, one globe, it was just Earth, no states, no countries, no borders, and we're just Earth. I don't think I don't think it's realistic that we delegate all that power to one person or one group of people. I think it would more reinforce that we're all a part of this thing. We're all our own leaders. We're all our own pieces to this puzzle. And it would create a deeper sense of responsibility because, I'm not just an American. You wouldn't think of, oh, I'm an American, so I have to do what's right for America, or I'm Vietnamese, so I must do right for Vietnam. You would think, oh, I'm a human. This is Earth. This is my
That's
country.
right. That's
We're in the
right.
country of Earth.
Yeah. Yes, I like that. That's really good. Well, listen, I know we're getting tight here on the time, so I'd like to leave you with one thought
Hmm.
um, before we go, and it's the first sentence in the book, and it's something that I think that if we can have it in our minds that to care for peace may not be the secret of life, but it is as close to the secret of living there is. Let me repeat that. To care for peace may not be the secret of life, but everybody is always thinking about what's the secret of life, but it is as close to the secret of living there is. So, Noah, thank you so much for
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity to share with you, but also the opportunity to hear your thoughts about where your mind has gone over these years, how you have arrived at these incredible thoughts. It really gives me hope. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you as well. That's a beautiful quote. And I want people to um, listen to this and not only just take what you've given them, but also keep um, actively being involved in these dialogues and these
Yeah.
conversations. Where can the people find you, follow you, and keep up with your journey and make sure they can get your book as well?
I'm happy if people have listened to this and they start using some of the terminology in their discussions with people.
Yeah.
It's not, this is what I believe in. Forget that. It's like, okay, let me use these words. If they want to get the book, they can. It's To Care for Peace. Just look up To Care for Peace on Google. It's on Amazon, and you can get it on Kindle or get a hardbound if you're really crazy. But I would say go ahead and get the paperback, because when you're finished with it, you can use it to line your bird cage. So
Nice.
that's it. And you can get a hold of me at jeff@careforpeace.org. That's it. So give me a shout out. I'd love to see your see your thoughts, and because it's like what you have done, Noah. And I can't wait to watch this because I want to actually listen more to what you were saying than what I already know what I was saying. Because I want to take some of those ideas that you were saying and see where I go with those ideas. Because you were a
Cool.
formidable host to this
Thank
podcast.
you.
And I want to make sure that I get a chance to listen to you again. So just
Thank
thanks
you,
a
man.
million. Thanks
Thank
a
you. I
million.
truly appreciate you and your time. I do hope that we get a chance to have another dialogue because you have so much knowledge when it comes to the world, and I would like to learn so much more about your travels and other things you've learned um, throughout your adventures on this earth. And thank you again for giving me your time.
And thank you.
I hope you have a good new year as well, and I
You
wish you the
too.
best of luck in all your endeavors.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, man.
I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living.
Bottom line, there were no weapons of mass destruction.
Totally unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. Of Ukraine.
A new world order. A new world order can emerge. A new era. No, don't clap, man, 'cause I got more.
Feeling peace in our time.
still want to rock the boat.
Peace in all time.